Fort Lawton is located in Discovery Park, Seattle. There is a plaque of important events at the entrance. There are many dates there, but a lot is missing. Dates like when the first Nature Park Day program began are included, but not the night of terror that occurred there in 1944. An unknown night of one-way violence and a death with international repercussions. This was the only time in history when Black Americans stood trial for lynching a white man. The riot led to the largest court-martial of World War II, yet when you ask the lady at the help desk of the park, she has only vaguely heard of it. The old barracks aren't there anymore, and now the park is just a skeleton of the port of embarkation it once was, with a total of 1.1 million troops passing through during and after the war. In the fort cemetery, there is a mysterious headstone on its own in a corner. This is one of the only present reminders of the little-known riot. On August 14, 1944, at 11:10 p.m., 3 Italians who were formerly prisoners of war were returning to their barracks from downtown Seattle. 4 black soldiers approached them yelling insults. Giuseppe Bell, one of the Italians, said that he looked and kept on walking. Another soldier called, "Hey Italian," and he was almost on top of me and coming at me with the knife. Then I turned around and saw the knife. I hit him with the left hook and he went down. The fallen soldier was carried back to the steps of the black soldiers' barracks. There, before long, a crowd of soldiers gathered around. Inflammatory remarks were uttered, and Corporal Larkin found a whistle and blew it. This was the signal for troops to assemble into military formation. Let's look at what led up to this episode. This was not the first time something like this had happened. Sadie Hughes, the mother of a defendant, later wrote that the white boys and the Italians was always into it. There had been friction between the Italian POWs and white soldiers over seating in service just the previous Sunday night, and black troops had to break up the fight. There could have been many reasons for tension between the black soldiers and the Italians. Most obviously, the Italians had a much easier life compared to the soldiers. For example, during the previous winters, black soldiers were used to shovel snow in Seattle's streets. Also, Americans still saw the Italian POWs as the enemy in an ongoing war. Tensions were also high because black soldiers were to ship out the following day, most likely to the South Pacific, where conditions were bad and American casualties were high. About 15 minutes after the exchange between the soldiers and returning Italians, some 200 black American soldiers stormed the Italian barracks, attacking in waves. Bell said, "The first thing I heard was stones against the building and a lot of yelling and shouting. They used rocks, axes, baseball bats, countless hunting knives, and switchblades as weapons. They stabbed people and clubbed them until they were unconscious. Italians hid under beds and were lured out by black soldiers disguised as military police. Others jumped out of the windows into the awaiting arms of the attackers. One Italian saw black soldiers driving a jeep over a tent with an Italian still in it. Sergeant Callahan said the riot was a one-way action of blacks assaulting Italians and American cavalry, with neither defense nor counterattack by the latter." At 11:30, the military police, or MPs, were ordered into action. They arrived 45 minutes after the riot began. By that time, dozens of Italians were seriously injured and many were unconscious. When Callahan arrived, he ordered the black soldiers to drop their weapons and return to their barracks. No arrests were made that night. At 1:30 a.m., Colonel Branson, the commanding officer, was notified of the riot, but told that they were all in bed and everything was under control. At about 7:10 or 7:15 in the morning, Branson was told that they had just found the body of an Italian serviceman hanging from a tree in that area. That was the first time the seriousness of the riot and the potential consequences were realized. Because an Italian POW was hanged on American soil, the American government's compliance with the Geneva Convention about the humane treatment of POWs could be questioned, potentially jeopardizing the lives of American POWs being held in Europe and Japan. One reason the riot was so one-sided was that Captain Beckman, the commanding officer of the 28th Italian Service Unit, had ordered the Italians that if anything came up that might lead to a fight, they were to retreat and come back to the company. The Italians were allowed no firearms in the area, and they had nothing with which to defend themselves. They didn't think they were going to need to be defended. The riot resulted in 34 people wounded and 1 death. Many mistakes were made in how the riot was handled. First of all, the MPs made no attempt to identify culprits or seek arrests. The morning after the riot, Branson ordered his post engineer to begin repairs of all the Italian barracks. They wiped out fingerprints and ripped up floors splattered with blood. In short, they purposely destroyed evidence of the riot. No photos were taken before the repairs. Regular procedures such as taking photos, protecting fingerprints, and tagging weapons weren't done. Both of the soldiers who discovered the Italian's body had police backgrounds. One even had additional training by the FBI. However, they didn't take any photos of the body, which was a standard police procedure. This riot led to the largest court-martial of World War II. 43 people were charged with rioting and 3 with murder. Because of the destruction of evidence, investigators had to rely on the naming of names. Sadie Hughes wrote, "A lot of the boys were brought back and charged with rioting. In the trial, they found 13 that was being held not guilty and 27 found guilty. Can it be that these 27 boys must pay for 3 companies for something all was involved?" She also said that most of them got long sentences. There was 200 years divided between the 27 of them, and all with a dishonorable discharge. In 2007, 64 years after the event, the Army ruled the trial unfair and overturned their convictions. It was discovered that evidence was withheld from the defense, and there were other flaws. An Oregon Public Broadcasting article wrote that the Army will apologize to dozens of veterans who were unjustly accused in the Fort Lawton court-martial. Their statuses were being upgraded to an honorable discharge, and the veterans' family attended the tribute in Seattle. It is evident that, at least at first, the MPs made no effort to make arrests, most likely because they didn't think the riot was any big deal. They probably did not like the fact that the Italians received special treatment or might have harbored different grudges. This was before a murder was involved. Once the body was discovered, they had to reverse that and find someone to place the blame on. The riot suddenly became an event of international importance. What everybody wanted to know was who was officially responsible. Because of possible international repercussions, the government needed to hold someone accountable. Without sufficient evidence, a panel of judges convicted 28 of rioting or manslaughter. The U.S. government wanted other countries to believe that they were doing the best to right a wrong and were punishing the culprits. In 2008, the Army apologized to the convicted veterans. They said the outcome of the trial relied on insufficient evidence and could have been a result of racism. The Seattle Times wrote that in a reversal of the sentencing, the Fort Lawton 28 were given military honors with an Army band and color guard, gospel choir, and speeches by many people. There was not enough evidence to be sure of anything. The government wasn't sure if the people convicted of rioting actually committed that crime, or even if the hanging was at the hands of black soldiers. The government influenced the outcome of who was to blame based on their needs at the time. When they had to convict somebody, they blamed a fairly random selection of black soldiers. When the conviction was no longer necessary, the government apologized. The riot should be a big deal. However, because the outcome was so heavily influenced by a government struggling with the complexities of racism and war, nobody could tell for sure what really happened. Because the story was so muddled and manipulated, the inconvenient truth has been handily forgotten and obscured. Just because justice wasn't served doesn't mean this event should be ignored.